about 6 more buttons and waiting to do, but they didn't have this on Teams. Didn't work right. I had lots of people watch me. That was pretty exciting. Actually, it was really weird. I got really weird comments. Nothing really bad, but it was just, someone like good, someone great, someone like, are you wearing that sweatshirt? Got like a sweatshirt on, and it was great. I don't know. Oh, yeah. I've had a lot of siblings who had me as a teacher. What's very, very weird is I'm starting to get children of former students, and that's a little bit odd. After you start going, whoa. But, that's life. And yes, in one somebody that's father in my class, and yes, they were in this very classroom, so that tells you a lot. They never let me out. Actually, this is the best classroom in the building. Why? Well, I got windows and all that, but it's the biggest besides room 6. And yeah, it's the biggest regular. Huh?
The entire side's
well, but the sides, that's different. You're that lab. So students class about lab or room 6 has a tier, but I don't know what that's in the windows. And I'm really isolated. So no, yeah, and I can leave whenever I want. Right out the window. So this is a very good classroom to be. No one bugs you. And I also got the cool desk. I say, so those other desks, the new desks, I think are backbreakers. I saved these for you.
With like the nice plastic.
Oh, they're just really hard. Yeah, they're really, these have real, if you got to sit in something, these are much better. Let me just say this really quick. Many times said, oh, you get new desks now. No. Huh. So like this, there's a desk with a big gouge out. That was probably done in like 19. These desks are literally that way. Yeah, you got a big one. You got a huge one. No, which there's one with like a massive gouge. You would have a huge gouge in front. Is that it? Oh yeah, you got the. All right. Should we just keep? Oh, look at this one. Should we just keep talking about the desk, or? So you just have to know everything? Are we cool? I'll just tell you stories, and you just have to know everything.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, what desk, how the desk would go. I'm sure that'll be on the AP exam. Okay, so moving on. Did we get to slide L mission? Who's the one who signed the annexation of Texas? Oh, Tyler. They did that joint annexation bill. Who was elected president in 1844? James Knox Polk. Yes. We got this claim. So we got Pat. Oh, good. Oh, and then who wrote this thing that's going to become the positive good theory of slavery? John! Hey! Calhoun! I didn't hear you. No, don't do it again. And with that, also with Calhoun, but here's the other big one. Remember, he would write that. We got slavery is doing what? Or slavery does what for the slaves? It protects them. They're not enslaving them because they want their free labor and work them to death. No, they're just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Doesn't that slavery sound pretty good?
Not really.
So with that, we got slide down. Let's go ahead and get to. Is that where we quit?
Yeah.
By the way, I should add something about Zachary Taylor here. Remember I told you about the photography and that bubbles in the glass? I'm just saying Zachary Taylor ought to get that checked out. That doesn't look good. I don't know. Kid cancer was an issue. Provoked a war. Yeah.
I think he kind of looks like both, like the halves of his face belong to two different people.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, with these shadows, but so with that, Taylor's going to take the tiny little parts of the U.S. Army, only a couple regiments. The Army is tiny, less than 20,000 men in the actual active U.S. Army. That's not counting Navy or the Naval Infantry, Marines. And march. Then we get to the march down to the Rio Grande. So that's the plan. The Rio Grande to the contested border. So that area between the Nueces and the Rio Grande River is area that Mexico claimed. So the Rio Grande The US claims that. And so the plan is they'll march down there and provoke Mexico or bully them. If they can bully Mexico, if Mexico does not react, then they can get California, force them to get California independence. So with that, march down. Tiny little army down in what's now, what tiny little heck, there's just a couple of adobe buildings called Brownsville, Texas. Well, now it's Brownsville, Texas.
Like, was he like a senator or something?
No, he was a general.
Okay.
And he had fought in the War of 1812 and fought in other battles along the frontier. He was considered to be, he was beloved by the men. He was a brigadier general at the time. That meant that's one star. But when Washington was the United States calls a lieutenant general at 3 stars. The highest ranking general in American history was actually a 6-star general. John Pershing, so from the World War I. We had a bunch of 5-star generals, World War II, but the highest ranking officer now is a 4-star general. We got all the numbers down, we good? He would eventually finish as a major general, which is 2 stars. See, I've done every one now, right? You feel good now? Do we got all our generals down? Yeah.
What's the rank when you do something that really doesn't need to be done, but you're still doing it just to be polite or extend a bunch of times before, even though it's unnecessary?
Actually, I can't think of it right now, but I don't know. I can't think of a term right now in front of you. That's one of the things, being in front of people, it's easy to forget stuff.
Does anyone else know?
What did you ask?
Being benevolent, polite, is that what you mean?
But basically like doing an action you don't need to take, but you're doing it anyway out of politeness for some reason.
I can't think of it. When we pop in our head, somebody will come up with it. Oh, one thing I should add then. He was a really popular general. He was beloved by the men. There's the thing about generals, they really are big. You know, some military officers are really big in like spit and span, spit and polish uniforms, being exactly like polished buttons and fresh uniform, perfectly shaved. They're called marionettes. And that sounds Zachary Taylor. Even though they're good generals, the men hate that. But they loved him because he didn't care. In fact, in battle, he wouldn't wear his general's tunic, coat. He would wear a red flannel shirt and a white straw hat. And they loved him because he didn't care as long as you fought hard. So they gave him the nickname. You remember we have Old Hickory? He's going to be Old Rough and Ready. Remember that? Doesn't that kind of sound like Old Hickory? Old Rough and Ready. So they marched out. The other thing is he's a Whig. He's politically a Whig. And even though he followed orders, he did not approve of this. And most Whigs did not approve of Polk's action. Even Southern Whigs who wanted this for more slave states to protect slavery. What body of Congress did they want? Equal number of slave states and free states. Senate, remember, the Senate is 2 per state. The House is by population. And where are most of the new immigrants going? Which section? North. So they need the Senate. Even Whigs Southern Whigs like Taylor, they were worried about Polk provoking this war. Who knows what road and what kind of country will this lead to? Will this lead to more democracy? So Taylor marched down south. And what happened is they started to aggressively patrol here. Nothing happened. So they started to actually cross the Rio Grande River into what everybody acknowledged was Mexico. The Rio Grande is a really shallow river. I'll be honest, when I first heard of Rio Grande, I just assumed like this wide river because that was the border. It's a really shallow, narrow river, easy to ford back and forth. And so they crossed. And be careful when you put your hands back. I think you're back at aid. Yeah. So what's coming up is called the Thornton Affair. On April 25th, 1846, American dragoons under the command of a Captain Thornton. I couldn't remember his first name, but it's Philip because it's on this. This is that Texas put up. They were attacked by Mexican soldiers. And it was a running fight, and to this day, we don't know exactly where it happened. But first off, we should add, what are dragoons? Yes,
Been on horses.
so they're not fire-breathing lizards. Darn it, that would have been pretty cool if they're fire. Who agrees that would have been cool? Yeah, fire-breathing lizards. We could have taken the world. They're mounted in. So what they are is they ride on horses and then they get off the horses to fight. By the Civil War, that's what cavalry was. They'd ride on horse, get on for the most part. But anyways, they were attacked. We don't know where, but what would Polk say? They were north of the Rio Grande, an area that the United States claims was Texas. And they would use that as a condition to declare war. Polk would say an unprovoked attack, and Congress voted not overwhelmingly, but the majority voted to declare war. Remember, Congress has to declare war, which is kind of funny now because Congress hasn't declared war since anybody know when? World War II. But Congress declares war, yes. There hasn't been a declared war since World War II. Since the United States declared war on Italy and Bulgaria.
Okay, but in that, but did we participate in the Vietnam War?
Yeah, we did. The United States participated in many wars.
Okay.
We just haven't declared.
Oh, what's the? I don't have to declare
No.
war to attack
Well,
country.
we'll get to that. So with that, a declaration of war. And with that, the South, this was mostly Southern states wanted this. And to this day, we don't know where, but Polk said, I know for a fact that they were attacked north of the Rio Grande. He did not know. We don't know to this day. If you say, I know something for a fact, and you don't know that, what are you doing? Lying. He lied to get into a war. Yes. It was a running fight. They took the wound, left a couple of the bodies. They drug back, and the rest of the wounded, they were able to get back on the horses. And so they could just say it was south of Brownsville. That's the point. Yeah. If they could get a war with Mexico going and defeat Mexico, that might force them to give them California. And so, with that, almost immediately after the initial, like, oh, war, then wait a second. Many Whigs and some Northern Democrats, Free Soilers, were concerned. And a young Whig politician elected to his first and only term in Congress would go up and give a speech saying, where was the spot where American blood was shed, implying it was south of the Rio Grande. So this was a lie. That man was Abraham Lincoln, a young Whig. And that's a picture taken a couple years afterwards. But one thing about Lincoln, he had massive hands. Yeah, he might have, we don't know 100% certain, but he seems like he did, which is pretty common. It's pretty common, just unusually long arms, long limbs. Basically, everybody in the NBA has that. They have unusually long arms. Just one of those things. But back to this. He said, show me the spot. And this was a resolution, therefore, if they couldn't show the spot, don't fund the war. It failed. It failed. But its big issue was the expansion of slave power. The expansion. It failed and Lincoln would lose for re-election and kind of go into obscurity. But in the tiny little group of former Whigs, he made a name for himself. And what is that term for a politician? Comes out of nowhere. Doesn't have a reputation. Dark horse. And that's what Lincoln would become in 1860. A free soil dark horse candidate. It's one of those things where kind of forgotten. Not totally. Let's go back to that monument at it's called the Thornton Affair. This was put up by the state of Texas, and they put it up in the 1890s. So this is after the Civil War. And they put down the spot where American blood was shed. That is a slap in the face of Abraham Lincoln. They hated Lincoln, and we'll show you. Take that, Lincoln. Hey, in many areas of the South, they wouldn't accept $5 bills. I'll tell you my $5 bill story down the road. But moving on. So, that wasn't the only plan that Polk had. There is also rumors that California might be near revolt. American immigrants and Californians, Mexican citizens there, were tired of rule from Mexico City. Remember with Texas, they revolted and became independent. And so there was a revolt, American immigrants and Californians who were already there. And so the US encouraged it and aided it. They aided it in two ways. The most important way would be John C. Fremont. Fremont was known as the Pathfinder. He was, at this time, a colonel in the United States Army, and he led a mapping expedition through Louisiana Purchase into Oregon territory, and then dipped into New Mexico and California. That's that. He just happened to be in Sonoma, California when the revolt began. It just happened to help the Californians and the American immigrants who were revolted. You catch my drift there. And so he just happened to be there. Now you might say, wait a second, this is after the declaration of war. Well, they didn't know that in 1846. So they were doing it as kind of plan B, just in case kind of thing. And so they just happened to be there and help. Fremont would become very famous for this. There was also a naval squadron under a commodore by the name of Stockton. Yes, Stockton, California would be named after him. Just happened to be off the coast of San Francisco, the most important Mexican harbor, so they couldn't bring up reinforcements. And so we helped California revolt. Would this be the first time we do this? No. No way. And so what we're going to have is two big things about this. The United States provoking revolts against governments we don't like. Wow, will this become an issue after World War II? And a lie to get into a war. Will this be the first time the United States will lie to get into a war? The Spanish-American War, the United States will lie. So misleading something, World War I. And then after the war, as an excuse for to give the president the authority to fight, Congress just said, do what you want. And other ones, but the one that's happened in your lifetime was Iraq. President George W. Bush said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. He knew it for a fact. Not only did he not know that, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. In fact, they were a poor and poverty country with an army hardly weapons, but that's another story. So, dangerous precedents are being set. I should add, the United States overthrowing governments that we don't like, that's going to hurt our reputation around the world. Fast. We will come to that down the road again. Back to this. So in Sonoma, they made this flag. They got a piece of burlap and they painted kind of a reddish bear and a star and California Republic. Unfortunately, this flag is gone. It was in San Francisco, in the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. So unfortunately, this flag, I would have really liked to see the original flag. We don't have that. But California declared independence, called themselves the Bear Flag Republic. They wouldn't be independent long. But the whole point is that would give the United States an excuse to annex it. That was the whole plan, like Texas. But now we're at war. And the United States is totally ill-prepared. There will be some fighting in California, other places. We're just going to talk about the main events, a couple of the main things. Like a lot of things, I got to kind of pick and choose. But Taylor's sitting there. We sent more reinforcements, but we need volunteers. And they're going to ask for volunteers all over the United States. But this is really kind of a Southern war. Southern states sent volunteers. And remember, they already have a very strong militia system in the South. Why do they have such a strong militia system in the South? Yeah. And so with that, one state sent so many volunteers to this fight. To this day, they're still known as the volunteer state. Anyone know? Tennessee. In fact, the University of Tennessee, their nickname, the Volunteers, from this war. Now, they're untrained, but one more thing the United States has. In 1822, the United States created something at an old fort we've mentioned before called West Point. Anybody know what the United States created? They're copying the French. Everyone copies the French when it comes to the military. Yeah.
Surrendering.
They
Now,
have-
the French are actually very good soldiers. Yes.
Didn't they create like
The U.S. Military Academy to train officers. The U.S. had professional officers. Doesn't mean they're good. Doesn't mean they're right. But the men trust them. They're professional. They're not people picked because they have, wealthy family. And they bought themselves. Guess whose army was like that? Next. So with that. So Taylor advanced. There'd be one battle here at Palo Alto, but advanced into Mexico. They thought they could win one big battle and Mexico would just give us California. That battle, the Americans thought would be Monterey. 1846, one big battle. And a 2-day, very difficult fight. Here's one of these lithographs. They stormed a Mexican citadel on top of a mountain. So I guess it's really pretty in Monterey, really pretty. But they stormed this citadel, took it, and Taylor became a big hero. The only problem was the Mexicans did not quit. They borrowed more money and were going to stay in the fight. It didn't happen the way we hoped. One big battle and they'll realize just give us California. So the war is going to go on. And now going into the winter of 1846-47, what do? Two things are pressuring Polk. Here's where Taylor is. If we could somehow threaten Mexico City, we could force them to sign a treaty giving us California. But then a blast from the past. Santa Anna is sitting in Havana, which Cuba was a Spanish colony still. Santa Anna sends word up to Washington, D.C. Hey, you send me back to Mexico City. You help me. I'll take over command and I'll give you California in the test. I just want to be president. Help me get back. Because Santa Anna was overthrown when the U.S. annexed Texas. Now, Santa Anna, I don't know if we could trust the guy. He's intelligent. He's competent. Maybe he can get things organized. Bumbling at times too. But they rolled a die. The U.S. paid to get him from Cuba to Veracruz. That's the harbor city for Mexico City. Mexico City's up 7,000 feet up the mountains. While that is going on, don't forget Taylor's a Whig. And Polk is sitting there thinking, if we have one more victory and Taylor wins it, he could ride that to the White House. Polk promised one term, but he wanted to be succeeded by a Democrat, not a Whig. And so they couldn't fire Taylor. So they took away all his trained troops and almost all his trained officers and left him nothing but volunteers up here and gave it to another general. Everyone got that scene going into 1847? So what happens? Santa Anna arrives in Veracruz, met as a conquering hero. Soldiers march him up the mountains. The government there literally just runs away. And Santa Anna is proclaimed president again. And what does he vow to do? Drive the Americans out, retake Texas. What a screw. And now Santa Anna is back and he organizes his forces and they march north to attack Taylor's depleted forces. This could have ended it right there. Don't forget, we look at this today and we think, okay, the United States is a lot bigger, wealthier, more industrialized than Mexico. The United States should have a big advantage. In 1846, the United States had a little advantage, not that much. Mexico could have easily won this war, and our entire course of history would be different. And so this was one of these moments, and the battle going in 1847 would be the Battle of Buena Vista. What a beautiful view. These high mountains, another lithograph. and the Mexicans attacked Taylor's now inexperienced forces, nearly broke through twice. On the last day, the story was, it's exaggerated here, but they were blazing away at each other at less than 10 yards away. But what made the difference, better officers and cannon. Do we get the Buena Vista the date? All we need to know is 1847. You're fine on that, but February. So just. Okay, one thing we've already told you, remember what's that thing where you put about 12 balls about this big? What do we call that in the cannon? You remember that term? Put about 12 in and you fire?
Yeah, it's like a broken
What do we call it? Remember?
grape shot.
Yeah, grape shot. Well, they have a new one called canister. And canister, imagine a can about this long, a cylinder can, full of about 200 to 250 musket bullets. So when they fire that out of a cannon, can you imagine what that's going to be like? It leaves just piles of flesh. Superior American officers and artillery saved the day, and the Mexicans were forced to retreat. And this is what you got to get. Taylor's an even bigger hero. A bigger hero. By the way, his son-in-law was at this battle. Son-in-law was a West Point graduate, so one of those new West Point graduates. A very ambitious politician, very strange, stern, angry man too. Big plantation owner. In fact, he just bought a massive plantation, and then Taylor's daughter would pass away so he could marry again. The big plantation right here in Mississippi. But his son-in-law thought would take him there, one of the few trained officers. You might have heard the name before. His name was Jefferson Davis. And Davis would become president of what entity in 1861?
Confederacy.
The Confederacy. So he would eventually betray his country, but that's another story. Moving on, that army that Taylor had, most of the trained soldiers would form a cadre of an army under Winfield Scott, about 10,000 men. Scott was maybe the most competent general in the United States Army. He was one of the heroes of the war in 1812 when they started rebuilding the army up here. They just couldn't get to Washington, D.C. to protect it because no roads. He was maybe one of the best in American history. Widely respected, intelligent, great tactician, but he was one of those sticklers for discipline. A marionette, polished button, perfectly creased uniforms and all that, and drove the men nuts. So they didn't give him a name like Old Rough and Ready. He was called Old Fuss and Feathers. Not quite the same, is it? But Fuss and Feathers was given almost an impossible task. He had to land here and then march up the mountains with only 10,000 troops. Not only does he not have enough men to have a supply line, so he's going to abandon the supply lines, live on the land and whatever ammunition they carry. It's an all or nothing attack. If he's caught in the mountain pass and destroyed, it's over. And they have to get out of here because in the summer, there's a mosquito-borne illness that just ravages this entire coast. You ever know the illness? Malaria. Good guess, but it's not malaria. Have you heard of yellow fever? Yellow fever. They got to get off the coast. And so they take Veracruz and march up the mountains. A couple different spots there. Santa Ana, with now a relatively untrained army, nearly stopped him and nearly ended the war right there. This was a really risky move. Most observers, a bunch of European officers came to watch and kind of see fighting. They thought Scott couldn't do it. But they made it up the mountains, attacked 2 Spanish fortresses, and then the third one at Chapultepec. An old Spanish fort built on an old Aztec temple. They stormed this fort after a 2-day battle in 100-degree weather, miserable. The U.S. forces were running out of water. But a number of officers fought here who are going to become quite prominent down the road. Men like George Meade and George McClellan, Braxton Bragg, a guy named Thomas Jackson, would be best known that he have a nickname called Stonewall down the road. There's this guy, a lieutenant by the name of Ulysses S. Grant, who was there. And then one captain, Mark, crawled on his hands and knees around the Mexican line, found a spot where they could attack, and would be personally commended by Scott. His name was Robert E. Lee, whose great uncle would be the one to ask for independence back in 1776, the first one to put it up to the Congress. And it would become the most famous traitor in American history, leading the Confederate forces. This was a training ground for the Civil War in many ways. They took Chapultepec and Santa Anna had the field. I should add, Chapultepec? Wouldn't that be a great name for a child? Who's with me? And think about it. Say it. Chapultepec. No, come on, say it. Yeah, isn't that good? Chapultepec, come here. Where's your brother Ticonderoga? It's wonderful. And trust me, they would never have any troubles at elementary or junior high with that name. Moving on. So Scott would enter Mexico City. The problem is, it might look like he conquered Mexico City, but it's a trap and he knew it. He barely had enough men to hold this. He's out of supplies, and there are millions of Mexicans who hate him and want him gone. Santa Anna is fleeing north. They can reorganize his forces. He's out of supply. In fact, Scott is not thinking about, Scott is not thinking, I've conquered Mexico. He's remembering something because they're all students, all these generals of previous wars. And he's thinking about 1812, when an army of nearly 1 million men under Napoleon invaded a country. They even captured their religious capital. Anybody know what country?
Russia.
Russia. They captured Moscow. Then what? Not exactly, but close. Napoleon had to leave very quickly, but yeah, the same kind of thing. And he's thinking the same thing. I'm in hostile territory, and it's be like Napoleon. And I'm gonna have to retreat. My army was gonna fall apart. It's over. That's exactly what he's thinking. And yes, there is an element of Germany there too. Avoid land wars in Asia. Write that down. I'm just gonna write that down. Moving on. But Polk hears about this. And Polk originally thinks, I was just hoping for California and the Rio Grande. All the way down to the Yucatan. How many states could that be? And so Polk sends another emissary saying, take it all. And Scott can't believe it. These people are delusional back in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of Southerners who are thinking at this time, why stop there? Why stop at the Yucatan? Argentina. Let's go all the way. Get it all. We're Americans. This is ours. And so Scott gets his can't believe it, and then they caught a break. Santa Anna was fleeing north. The problem is Santa Anna had a wagon train of nearly 100 wagons of just his personal stuff. He couldn't leave his stuff behind. So he had gold, he had all kinds of valuable art, emeralds, jewelry, a couple mistresses, and wagon after wagon of what? Yeah.
The wagons were full of slaves, and it reminds me.
He didn't have slaves.
And it reminds me of how I have to wait for a bunch of time because my mom has to get all of the things in her purse and spray for her.
Well, okay, but remember, that's what didn't have slavery. What else do they have? Yeah. Over 1,000 wooden legs and other artificial legs in wagon after wagon. He took them all with him. And imagine this long, snaking wagon train. It's barely moving. And American dragoons caught him. They caught him. And you can imagine what happened. They got Santa Anna. Now he's taken under custody to this place called Guadalupe Hidalgo. And they went through and did what soldiers have done from time immemorial. Looted the wagon train, taking stuff. You can imagine all the gold kind of disappeared. But then they found the legs. I can just imagine, like, what the heck are these? They're running around with legs. Baseball was a game. They were playing baseball, a little bit different rules with the legs. They did all kinds of stuff, but he didn't just have wooden legs or just stumped. He had legs that were carefully made for every occasion. He had legs that were, one was a wooden leg, but it was encrusted with diamonds and emeralds. He had another leg that was gold plated, solid gold, and then one that was solid gold, one that was solid silver, which would be far too heavy to ever use. He had another leg that was a cannon, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. So he would like put his leg up and fire. Wouldn't that go whoop? And think how that would hurt on the stump. Also, he had one, this is my favorite, supposedly, he had one that was a sword. Now think about that. So you take off the sheath and then you go, yeah! But just imagine that first step you would take if your leg was a sword. Right down. All those valuable legs were liberated and never to be seen again. But some would-be entrepreneur grabbed these wooden legs and somehow spirited them back to New York City. And they very carefully carved out of these something that would become kind of like the biggest souvenir for the war. They carve out of there. You get toothpicks. Santa Ana toothpicks became the thing to have after this war. If you go to the U.S. or the Smithsonian Museum of American History, there is one of these. Now, don't think about like a toothpick today. You have thin little thing you use once. A toothpick then would have been more like a wooden pencil, a little bit thinner, and you would shave it, use a knife and whittle to a point and use it and to use it over and over again. I don't recommend using toothpicks here. I used it here. No, don't do that. But you have one there, and obviously they cut a bunch more. We have couple more Santa Ana stories to go, but now he's captured. The Santa Ana strategy then was, I'm not signing anything. You're withering on the vine going into 1848. He knows the longer he waits, the better chance that Scott has to leave. So what's going to happen? That is going to lead to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. You guys are leaving? And don't forget chapter 11 for, what day did I say? Saturday? Tuesday, right? Okay. So, oh, don't you like this picture? You see the crack in the glass negative? And boy, those eyes. Them some creepy eyes. Okay. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was finally signed. Trist finally went back. Nicholas Trist was the original negotiator. They ignored Polk and signed what they originally wanted. And Santa Ana finally agreed. They're not going to try to take the whole thing, which would have been a catastrophe. So instead, the Rio Grande is going to be the border, the Rio Grande. And then the United States is going to get California and this massive area here, which was New Mexico. This whole area from Texas to California, so right here, will be called the Mexican Cession. Cession is another way of saying ceded. Ceded is to be given to a country. And then the United States didn't want to look like one of those evil European imperial powers that fought for empire. No, we're a democracy. We wouldn't do that. We just happened to fight a war, then signed this treaty. So we paid Mexico a total of $18.3 million. We bought it for $15 million. And then U.S. claims on Mexico means Mexico owed U.S. citizens debt, bonds. So we paid Mexican debt. So 18.3 total million. So similar to what the United States paid for Louisiana, even though Louisiana is more territory. Which one was a better deal for the United States? Just getting California alone. There's so much wealth in California, it's hard to even comprehend. There's more wealth in California than there is in Helena. Yeah, yeah. So we could claim, but everybody knew this was a war of conquest. Everybody knew it. But remember what Polk said. Treasury, lower the tariff, Oregon Treaty, California. He got everything he said he was going to get and would not run for re-election. So everyone write down the Wilmot Proviso. This was added to one of the first appropriations or spending bill for the war. So write down Wilmot Proviso and then read this direct excerpt from the war. David Wilmot was a Free Soil Democrat, absolutely unknown. Free Soil Democrat from Pennsylvania. A proviso, if you ever heard the word amendment to a bill, means the same thing. I'm just make sure the fonts. I was talking about the Mexican Cession, even though that term wasn't used yet in 1846. But what does it say about that Mexican Cession?
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall ever exist in any part of said territory.
So no slave, or more better way to look at it is no slave codes. No slave codes in the Mexican Cession. No slavery. You're a criminal. No slavery. And so his big issue, no slave power. Stop the expansion of slave power. And so here's a Free Soil Democrat, unknown. And this shocked, it shocked the Polk administration. They weren't ready for this. It shocked Southern Democrats in Congress. They weren't ready for this. This was added, and the amazing thing was, it passed. It passed the House, but the Senate, remember the Senate is balanced. A couple of Northern Democrats voted with the Southern Democrats, and it failed. And Wilmot overnight would become not only the most famous member of Congress outside of Henry Clay and a couple others, his name represented the entire issue of slavery now. Another one of these really good maps from 1849, isn't it? Pretty amazing how good a map makers they were. Yes, I know I keep saying it, but I'm always kind of in awe. Eventually, they would vote on Wilmot or something like it. And pretty soon, Wilmot became the term for the slavery fight. Literally. 42 times. 42 times it would pass the House and fail in the Senate. 42 times. All you had to say by 1848 is Wilmot, and you might have a fist fight. Everybody's talking Wilmot, Wilmot, and both parties. What was their position on Wilmot? They were running away as fast as they could, the national parties, because it was so divisive. So we won the war, Wilmot. So with that, the election of 1848 is coming. Polk's not going to run again, and the Whigs are going to do it again. Harrison worked, Scott, the hero of Buena Vista. Winfield Scott. Oh, that's he Scott?
Yeah.
Taylor. Zachary Taylor. I'm sorry, Zachary Taylor. Oh, rough and ready. Oh, rough and ready. The war hero again. I should add Scott was a Whig too. But Fuss and Feathers isn't quite as catchy. All rough and ready. His running mate for New Hampshire is a northern Whig, obviously, named Millard Fillmore. Same kind of thing that Harrison tried. The Whigs tried in 1840. A southern Whig, Taylor's from Louisiana, a northern Whig, that's vice president, to try to appeal to northern and southerns. And what was Taylor's position on Wilmot? The Battle of Buena Vista. All I care about is I'm a war hero. Exactly. Exactly. Terrified of it. What's your position on the tariff or the American system? The Battle of Monterey. Just totally avoid the issues. But there was a whispering campaign. To Southern Whigs, they said, don't worry, he's from Louisiana, he's one of us. And to Northern Whigs, they said, Zachary Taylor, he's a Whig, he's the party of Henry Clay. He's one of us. So that's how they did it. And then we'll get, this also shows contempt for regular voters, and we'll lie to them and just try to encourage them to vote based upon a war hero. The Democrats are in disarray. they would finally nominate a former war hero from the War of 1812, the governor of Michigan, Lewis Cass, who looks absolutely terrifying right here. But Lewis Cass. And what they came up with is a compromise, they thought. It's called popular sovereignty. We'll let the voters decide. They can decide whether or not to have slave codes. When I mean voters, I mean people who come into that new territory. They will decide their constitution. Now, this might sound more democratic, and that's the point. We'll let the voters decide. The problem is it's a scam because vote win. If you vote right away in New Mexico and California, there's no slavery in Mexico and California, and they will vote to not have slave codes. If you wait, that means you have to open it up to slaves, and that changes everything. And everybody knew that popular sovereignty was a scam. A future vote down the road sometime, 1850, 1851, will open that territory to slavery. That's why. Remember I showed you that map of the United States and had slaves in New Mexico and in Utah and a couple other places? That's why. We'll get to that, but that's why. So this was a scam. It sounded democratic, but it hid so much. But now they're stuck with it. And a third party will jump in. Martin Van Buren, remember the Trojan horse? He's going to run as a free soil party. They'll get some of those Liberty Party people. They're going to take away votes from the Democrats. So who's going to be elected president? Split the Democrats, and Taylor would win. But here's the problem with Taylor winning. He really didn't have any idea what to do about Mexico. He's like, but you know, he's got a lot of time. You don't have to worry about California or, you know, we got a lot of time before it's going to become a state. There's not going to be this huge influx of people into California, will there be? No, nothing. Nothing's going to be discovered in 1848 and lead to thousands of immigrants going to California in 1849, right? Nothing to see here, move on. What's going to happen in 1849?
Gold rush.
And what do you personally know, what do we call all those immigrants who came from the East and went to California to find gold? That's a generic name. What do we call them specifically in California? They came in 1849, so they're 49ers. I should add one more thing. And then they're going to say, we want state government. We want to be a free state. Civil War tomorrow. I work and I work. Have a good weekend, everybody. About 7 o'clock tonight, it's going to be about, what do you think, 8 degrees? I heard there might be some wind too. I don't know. I don't know about the wind. I made that part up. Have a good weekend, everybody. Were those yours?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Have a good weekend, everybody. Oh, yeah. Pretty clever. Oh, yeah. So, okay. You're gonna give me one of your two models. I'll give you one of your two shreds. Give me a good one of each. That's my fun. The thing about it is, I know you would know. Yes. I'm gonna give you a start.
I got this one.
Yeah, as long as you don't break anything, I'm out of here.
I won't break anything. Break it, maybe.
We'll see, yeah. We'll talk. What? I don't know.
Freezing. No, it is so warm.
That was a
My
nice.
hands are freezing, but I'm sorry, I pushed it. Dude, in like 2 minutes. So, comment.
Ready? Yes. It. I was about. I thought my wrist.
Really? How'd you do it? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I went back to the phone. You, I didn't just. That's really. It's like it's. You're literally. I seriously. It'll get out. I know. She actually doesn't keep talking. I was like.
Look at my wrist, people. We got work to do.
I know,
In E and it's confused kids. I said E.
All right, everybody. First thing is first. Did not bounce. Not even a partial. You'll pay for that. All right. So you have to read chapter 11 America by Tuesday. If you're going to be gone on Monday to Monday, Tuesday, there are some things on Thanksgiving. But I also decided to give you an opportunity for some extra credit. I will post it on Teams, and I've talked about it, a little bit extra credit. It's good little short story read. Okay, so but we'll talk about that more a little bit later, and something else. Really warming up outside. Have you been outside? I mean, it's like 8. It's gonna be double digits soon. I think, but tonight at 7 is supposed to be about 8, some. It's 12, maybe a little wind. You'd be sweating.
Trying to get them to bring back the big old barrels and just fire. Great.
So I remember the barrel, and I remember there's a story about somebody who, their feet caught fire on the barrels. And the funny thing is, he's a retired teacher, and he's subbing here today, so it's really funny. That's really funny. All right, so where do we finish in there? By the way, did we get to Zachary Taylor? Did we get to Garden Affair? Good. Did we talk about it or just get to it? A little bit, right? Yeah, fire breathing. And that's the thing we remember, fire breathing dragons. And so I'm trying to get, I got to go through, there's a war, horseman in the sky. Oh, still recording that. If everyone say goodbye to. Everyone say goodbye. There's the recording. I'm stopping recording. Enthusiastic.